I'm Margaret Ryan in Copenhagen, Denmark at the UN Climate Talks. And with me now is Bob Dixon. He leads the climate investment section with the Global Environment Facility. Bob, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
You have seen a lot of these COPs. We're 48 hours away right now from any conclusion of this. Where do things look? Where are they going from your point of view, your experienced point of view?
Well, Margaret, you're right. I've seen 15 of these COPs, and I take the long view. But we're in this interesting phase where the negotiators have done their work, and they've now prepared text to be considered by ministers and heads of state. So behind the curtain, directly behind us, the discussions are taking place as to how to bring together the final pieces of the agreement. Areas of disagreement or areas which need to be fine-tuned, those discussions are taking place today and tomorrow.
Now on financing, there's really been two different areas. One of them is quick start financing and the other is the longer term financing. On quick start, a lot of the developed countries seem to have stepped up to the plate and said, yes, we'll commit to some money in the 2010-2012 period. Are you seeing that? Do you think something will come out of Copenhagen on quick start?
Well, I'm not sure what will come out of Copenhagen, to be perfectly clear at this point in time. We still have a day and a half of negotiations. But it looks like, yes, quick start may emerge from the negotiations. I've been, again, behind the curtain listening to the presentations by the heads of state and the ministers, and there's a lot of interest in picking that approach and beginning to scale up and directly impact our investments in mitigation and adaptation activities.
Now, quick start, $10 billion a year is the number being talked about. How do they spend that? Do they just like write checks to various countries? How does that get into operation?
Well, that's the big challenge, isn't it? We're probably going to leave Copenhagen with a broad framework, a press communique, and some other documents which will provide guidance to officials like myself who will have to interpret that guidance and work with the different donors and in fact stand up the appropriate institutions, windows for funding, and develop a plan for being responsible, credible, accountable for these resources, and working with both the developing countries as well as the developed countries which provide the funds.
What are the developing countries looking to this money for? What kinds of projects will they be accomplishing with this?
Well, there's 192 or 3 countries that are represented here.
Well, let's have the least developed, the poorest, people keep referring to.
Well, of course, the poorest of the poor are looking to, in fact, make investments in new energy technologies so that they can in fact reduce their own emissions and achieve energy security and grow their economies. At the same time, those countries, many of them are now beginning to see the early impacts of climate change. So they're also looking to adapt to a changing climate. So they're looking to different agricultural practices or investments in new seeds or other types of practices, best practices or technologies which would in fact enable them to adapt to a changing climate.
Okay, now the other piece of financing here that's being talked about is much longer term, a kind of indefinite, really, that we've heard discussed. What does it take to gear up to spend on the order of, people are talking $100 billion a year?
Well, that's right. We're talking probably about a 10-fold increase in the funding. And of course, that deal isn't done yet, but let's assume that we're moving towards that deal. There's a lot of work that has to be done to use existing institutions such as the Global Environment Facility or other institutions that are positioned to in fact be recipients of those funds, and then work methodically, effectively, in such a way that those funds are used very effectively. A good metaphor for this would be in the United States, the funds that are being used to stimulate the economy. Those funds are appropriated by Congress and they move into the economy stepwise because we want accountability, we want effectiveness and efficiency. Those stimulus funds are having an impact, but it's taken some time. I think it'll be the same as we take the long view with this new $100 billion fund, which the donors seem to be lining up to support. It's going to take months to years, I think, to move those funds forward and put them out in the field where they can be effective. But you know, this is important for the American taxpayers to understand that everybody here is keen for accountability, transparency, monitoring, reporting, verification. we want to maximize the effectiveness of these investments. And we have a good record of doing that. At the Global Environment Facility, we leverage our funds sometimes 10 to 15 to 1. So for every
public to private?
Yeah, that's right. That's for every $1 donated by a donor such as the US, we're able to multiply that by a factor of 15. And yes, I think we will be working more and more through public-private partnerships. This morning, Secretary Clinton, when she announced the US contributions, she was very specific in saying it would be public and private partnerships, putting packages of money together to maximize their effectiveness.
Now, some of the developing countries have been protesting. They want a new institution to handle the money. They don't want the World Bank, the Global Environment Facility, regional development banks. And other people say, hey, it would take an awful long time for a new institution to gear up. What's your take on that?
Well, indeed, I think there are different views out there. But again, listening to the head of states speak, a number of developing countries have spoken up in support of the Global Environment Facility, the World Bank, and other institutions. And I think they should recognize that we need to modify these institutions, refine them, and so they can, in fact, deal with these larger sums of money to move quicker and more effectively and more efficiently. And speaking for the Global Environment Facility, we indeed are embracing reform, and so that we can step up and do the job that the donors would ask us to do.
Now
but let's see how it unfolds.
This is not a job of months, though. You're talking about years going out.
Well, that's right, Margaret. Let's, again, I take the long view. I've been at this for 15 COPs, and these negotiations will continue in the future. This will not be the ultimate deal. We're going to Mexico next year, South Africa the year after that, and I expect these discussions to continue so that we can be good custodians of these public resources.
Okay. Bob Dixon with the Global Environment Facility, thanks so much for talking to us today.
My pleasure.
And in Copenhagen, Denmark, I'm Margaret Ryan for Clean Skies News.